America is back. That was Joe Biden's message to the world when he was declared the projected winner of the 2020 presidential election, pledging to repair the United States' ties with its allies and restore the spirit of global peace and cooperation in the world amid the ongoing pandemic. President Biden recommitted to the essence of Washington's foreign policy, which has been to protect American interests, security, and virtues such as democracy around the world. But this might be easier said than done, as the US might not enjoy the unrivaled power it once had, as Biden faces a drastically different world compared to the heydays of globalization and liberal democracy. Today, we discuss the challenges ahead for the Biden government with Doug Bandow, Senior Fellow at the Cato Institute, who is Special Assistant to the former US President Ronald Reagan. We also welcome James Kim, Director and Senior Research Fellow at the Arirang Institute of Policy Studies. Welcome to you both, and we've got quite a lot of issues to cover today, so let's go straight into the questions, beginning with you, Doug. Now, Joe Biden, he's got an awful lot on his plate. The past decade, it's in particular seen the rise of ultranationalism and division in the world, and as America under Trump retreated from its leadership role, autocratic leaders and regimes have been expanding their spheres of influence. And while former President Trump might have dealt with foreign threats in a rather unorthodox fashion, Obama as well, he was criticized by some by being rather passive when it came to dealing with certain leaders and regimes, including North Korea. It was also under the Obama administration and its officials like Antony Blinken and Jake Sullivan that America became involved in wars like the Saudi-led war in Yemen. What do you think Biden should really learn from his predecessors, and how do you think he should really develop his signature foreign policy style?
Well, President Biden needs to set priorities. His inaugural speech focused on domestic issues. He emphasized the importance of bringing Americans together, of dealing with COVID, of dealing with unemployment and economic issues. His discussion of international issues was much shorter. I believe his emphasis is that the U.S. has to be strong at home to be involved abroad. It certainly makes sense for the president to focus on what's important overseas. China clearly is, North Korea is, and not emphasize issues like the Middle East. That Obama tried to move away from that. And President Biden, when he was vice president, was skeptical of getting involved in Libya, wanted to not double down on forces in Afghanistan, has talked about ending support for the Saudis in Yemen. So there's an opportunity for the president to maintain an active American presence, but to be much more thoughtful in where he does it and looking for the areas that it's important and critical and not getting involved in everything where, frankly, he won't have the American public behind him.
Now, James, Joe Biden, he's promised to put America back at the head of the table in the face of global challenges. Do you think US leadership is going to be as powerful as it was before, or will it need help, particularly from middle power countries like those in Europe and South Korea?
Yeah, I think it's there's a significant challenge ahead for the Biden administration, given what last 4 years have done to both transatlantic and trans-Pacific alliances. It's, I'm somewhat agnostic. I'm not, leaning one way or the other as to whether President Biden is going to be able to deliver on his promises. But one of the central themes of the incoming administration, as we've seen from previous statements by Biden himself and nominees for his cabinet, is this key interest in revitalizing core alliances as force multipliers. To the extent that South Korea has a vested interest in committing itself to multilateralism and global issues, there's some role for South Korea to play as a middle power, but it requires countries like South Korea to take a broader view on foreign policy that pushes beyond the boundaries at home. And that's especially challenging during a time when you're dealing with a pandemic. Every single country around the world are dealing with these issues. And if you take a look at Korea in particular, aside from the pandemic, I think the administration in Seoul has been squarely focused on peninsula-related issues, the Korean Peninsula-related issues, mainly North Korea, over the past 4 years, and has shied away from these other global issues that the U.S. May and other countries are interested in, issues having to do with things like maritime security, international human rights, coordinating on the establishing a universal technology standard, trade, climate change. These are some of the issues where South Korea hasn't really been as active in for the past 4 years, and to some extent, it's not just South Korea, maybe some other countries as well, because U.S. leadership was not there during that time. But yes, we have a changeover in administration in Washington, but it also requires countries like South Korea to step up to the plate and make some serious commitments in these areas for U.S. leadership to be effective.
So a lot to work on, not just the US, but its key allies as well, and one of them being dealing with foreign powers like Russia and China. And Doug, Trump's admiration of Russian President Vladimir Putin did raise a lot of eyebrows over the past 4 years. And of course, he didn't condemn Moscow for its nerve agent attack in London, nor did he stand by what his own intelligence officers told him. And many believe that the Kremlin were behind the massive cyber attack last month on the US government agencies. Do you also agree that the cyber attack was probably conducted by Russia? And if so, what message do you think they're really sending with this? And well, on top of that, how tough do you think Biden will be or should be on the Kremlin?
Well, the irony is that the U.S. policy was tougher on Russia under Trump than under Obama. There were increases in sanctions. The U.S. provided anti-tank missiles to Ukraine. So in practice, there was no relaxation of policy. Now, the rhetoric, of course, was quite different. The cyber attack is widely believed to have been from Russia. I personally have no knowledge, but I'm willing to accept that. The challenge is that almost everyone also believes that it was essentially an intelligence operation, which falls within normal operations of governments. That is, a government like the U.S. presumably does the same sort of thing. So at least on that cyber attack, it will be hard to retaliate in terms of sanctions because the Russians have done what governments have done for a very long time. Biden is likely to be tougher on Russia. He's, in fact, declared Russia to be the #1 problem, while he simply talked about China as being a competitor. Some of those around him view China, I think, more seriously, but Biden is very likely to challenge Russia. It's one reason why Biden wants to work closely with Europe. He's always been very friendly to Europe. He knows the European leaders. So I would assume we will see closer cooperation with NATO, with the European Union, and the U.S. government, and a fair amount of attention will be devoted towards Moscow.
However, Europe has been edging slightly closer to China in recent weeks with the massive investment deal that they made. And James, many do expect China to be one of Biden's greatest foreign policy challenges. And of course, tensions between the two powers have really put a lot of countries, including South Korea, in a very sticky situation as they try to balance their security alliance with Washington while maintaining their trade relations with China. What do you hope to see from the Biden administration as all these countries try to muddle through this geopolitical mess that we've seen in the last 4 years?
Well, it'd be nice to have some clarity on policy with respect to China. I don't think it was as clear under the Obama administration's rebalance. It wasn't clear whether it meant keeping China in check, whether to contain China. There was a lot of debate about exactly what the Obama administration's policy was with China because the words didn't quite match up with the action. I think we had some clarity to some extent under President Trump, but at times it was muddled because of trade deals he was interested in. So if we could get some clarity on the strategy and exactly what this, whether you call it an Asia rebalance or an Indo-Pacific strategy, whatever that may be, what the United States would like to do vis-a-vis China, and how the Biden administration wants to move forward in a multilaterally coordinated manner with like-minded countries, then the choice becomes a little bit clearer for countries like South Korea.
And of course, it's been also hinted that North Korea is one of the agendas that the US could possibly work with China on resolving. And James, while it's been quite clear that North Korea won't exactly be at the top of Biden's agenda at this point, his key security and foreign policy officials are those who had experience dealing with the North. How do you think they're going to approach the denuclearization issue?
I think North Korea will remain, as Doug pointed out earlier, a key issue, but there's an understanding here that it's a very difficult issue. And at the moment, it's not as urgent as some other issues like Iran and China. I think Iran in particular, because of a coming election in June, if the Biden administration wants to work out another nuclear deal with the Iranian government, it needs to speed it up before the June election or wait till the new administration gets in place and then figure out exactly how to move forward with the new administration in Iran. China is going to be an issue that's going to be around for some time. U.S. also has a series of negotiations with Russia that Joe Biden is interested in somehow bringing back, maybe. As I mentioned earlier, restoring the transatlantic and trans-Pacific alliance relationship is also very high on the agenda, along with climate change. But domestic concerns takes priority above all else with President Biden, already having moved very quickly to sign series of executive orders to address the COVID pandemic in the U.S. So there's a laundry list of problems that Biden has to deal with before getting to North Korea. And so I think any development on the North Korean front will depend on what Pyongyang decides to do first, and whether they're interested in holding talks, as you pointed out earlier, or getting serious about denuclearization. So my view here is that Pyongyang holds all the key for now, and we'll have to wait and see what they decide to do first.
And Doug, of course, as James just mentioned, there's a lot of questions on how Biden is going to deal with the Middle East. I mean, from ripping up the nuclear deal with Iran to empowering the Saudi royals, many have blamed Trump for worsening instability in the region and increasing the power of non-Arab states like Iran, Israel, and Turkey. What do you think are going to be the biggest challenges? The biggest changes that Biden will bring to the Middle East?
Well, the most dramatic change will be dealing with Iran. That certainly the president wants to move back towards the JCPOA, the nuclear deal. Whether the U.S. can simply go back into it is more complicated. Iran has moved beyond the deal as well. It would have to make changes. Nevertheless, the president wants to talk with Iran without essentially being at economic war with Iran. Very, very different policy from that of Donald Trump. The new president is still going to be very pro-Israel, but he won't be so pro-Netanyahu. I think you will see a greater effort to engage the Palestinians, an effort that Donald Trump abandoned. And the new president is going to be tougher on Saudi Arabia. It's one aspect of believing in human rights. Saudi Arabia, frankly, is worse on human rights than Iran. This is going to be a real issue, especially with Yemen. The terrible catastrophe there that is mostly caused by the Emiratis and the Saudis. That is one where Tony Blinken, the soon-to-be Secretary of State, and others have indicated that they will stop supporting Saudi Arabia in that war. That will be a very major change. On the other hand, the president's going to support, I think, the Abrahamic Accords. We'll be very happy to see the Gulf countries working with Israel. He will see that as a positive step. Turkey, I suspect this new administration will be tougher. President Trump liked Erdogan. They had a personal relationship, but Turkish policy has turned rather hostile to not only the U.S., but NATO and Europe. I think that's when you're going to see this administration try to take on a bit more. So there's going to be some important changes there, that we'll see some continuity, but on a few of these issues, very substantial changes.
So quite a lot of issues there that Biden will have to work through, and of course, some of the changes we'll see will be that he won't be relying on his son-in-law to exchange WhatsApp messages in the middle of the night, perhaps. But well, I'm afraid this is where we're going to have to wrap up the discussion today. That was Doug Bando, Senior Fellow at the Cato Institute, who was Special Assistant to former US President Ronald Reagan, and James Kim, Director and Senior Research Fellow at the Arirang Institute of Policy Studies. Thank you both so much for your time.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, as always, thank you for watching.